All right, I know folks are trickling in from getting their coffee. Welcome to everyone on the stream for our next session. So we've been talking about identity a lot in this track so far today, but it's really important to think about inclusivity when we talk about identity. So not everybody has access to the same levels of technology. Not everybody is as, we have disabled folks, we have folks that maybe can't go through the vetting process with identity in the same way that anybody else could, right? Not everybody is, equally technologically able to access things. So really happy to have Marcin Zimny, who's the Principal Solutions Architect at ForgeRock, here to talk about how do we grapple with this? What steps can we take to make sure that our identity solutions are inclusive? So please help me to welcome Marcin Zimny.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for taking your time. I'm really glad to be here. My name is Marcin Zimny. I'm a solutions architect by job, but I'm identity evangelist by heart. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that is very close to my heart. So I would like to introduce you to the term of digital vulnerability, and I have to tell you the story that led me on this journey. And it is very personal, so I like to think that it's real. I have an elderly aunt in Denmark, and one day I went to visit her, and she started to tell me this problem about the internet connection. And she said, well, the wireless router didn't work, my iPad didn't work, and I was really worried that, and the bottom line was that I could see frustration and fear in her eyes, and how the system and how the internet service provider failed her in the efforts to restore the connection. And you may think that, well, there's no internet, not a biggie, I've got my phone, I've got my 5G. But at certain stages in our lives, time is the most valuable commodity that we have. And for her, it meant that she cannot contact her grandkids on FaceTime. And make no mistake, for her, that and then is a big problem. So I started to look at the problems, and even today, or even yesterday when I spoke to some of you, someone said, yes, but you're only focusing at 1% of the population. I'm a big fan of movies, so today you'll hear about a few movies that I want to quote, and the first one I'm starting is The Tourist. Angelina Jolie and Johnny Depp. And Johnny Depp is in a hotel room, someone knocks on the door, says room service, and then they try to kill him. So he runs away, goes to the police station, detective comes in with a piece of paper and says, so you wish to report murder? And he says, attempted murder. So the guy puts the pen down and says, that's not so serious. And Johnny Depp says, no, if you downgrade it from murder, it's not. But if you upgrade it from room service, it's quite serious, right? So when we look at the percentage of people affected by digital vulnerability, it's not so serious. But if we translate that to the number of people and identities affected by the problem, suddenly it becomes an important matter. So I started to go around and research, and I didn't have to go far, my mother-in-law and her internet provider again. And I started, and this problem is not linked to internet service providers, so we'll talk about financial services too. And I started to look, where's the problem? For 20 odd years, we were trying to make trains, shops, hotels accessible. And we did a good job. Right now, we're in a fairly comfortable position. And we somehow forgot about that in digital journeys. Yes, we have large font. We have standards for accessibility. But large font doesn't matter if you cannot display it. And when I started to look at the problem, is it about the visually impaired or the hearing impaired? And I thought, we're not fixing the root cause of the problem. The root cause of the problem for a blind person isn't that they can't see. The root problem is that we're using the wrong channel for that person. And I realized also that the digital vulnerabilities does not discriminate and actually can affect all of us, not just those permanently disabled or permanently impaired. At any stage of our life, we can become vulnerable. And my friend here in the front, Selvin, he yesterday signed up for the Touch ID. And I said to him, make sure you add your second finger, because your right hand might go into cast one day, and you have to have this resiliency. So I'm going to be giving some of examples later on of how we're failing the vulnerable people. But let's look at what Albert Einstein said about them. And he said, we cannot solve the problems using the same methodology that created them. So let me give you an example. We cannot solve the problem of passwords by throwing more controls on them. We can't. The fundamental problem of a password is not its length, complexity, and how many times we use it, whether once or twice. The fundamental problem of a password is that it exists, right? So we cannot solve the problem of a blind person by making the font bigger. That's not going to work. And the most common vulnerability, digital, is the lack of a smart device, for example. And a few years back, I was advising one of UK's universities after a breach, and I said, what's the big deal? We have to add MFA, simples. Let's add push notification. They said, we can't do that. Why? Because our students don't have smartphones. Not everyone's got a smartphone. I said, get out of town. That's impossible. And they said, no, we do have students from third world countries. We have poor students. We have some that cannot use push notification for the MFA. And my eyes opened. So we have to focus on the root problem, not everything else. Now, the identity life cycle, okay? It's not about the joiners, movers, leavers, but about how we go through life and how our digital twin exists. And our digital twin exists cradle to grave and beyond. And those identities are connected. And we have 3 main cohort groups that we've broken them down to youth, adult, and senior. And you can see that black element there. This is after we die. This is after we pass away and go away. Our identity still exists and still affects other people. I'm insured. I have a life insurance. If something happens to me, my wife's going to be paid out. But here's the problem, right? She, at that point in time, will be vulnerable. I know that. So she wants to cash the insurance. So when does she do that? A day after I die, a week? And she will be uncomfortable speaking to anyone about that from the insurance company over the voice channel because she might feel bad about that. So maybe the digital channel is the right way to do that rather than a call center. And because we affect other lives, and because the vulnerability is different at each stage of the life, we have to look at them from that perspective as well. And remember, the digital twin lives beyond. So, a good friend of mine, Adam Price, and myself, sat down and said, how can we define what an inclusive identity is? How do we not leave anyone behind? What are the principles, the key things that we need to deploy or utilize in our designs? And we came up with this digitally vulnerable people authentication principles. And I'm a big fan of movies, so you'll hear a few more references, but first of all, inclusive by design. Controls are not a panacea. So I can't just throw an unlimited amount of controls because they cost money, but controls don't solve the problem. And the design of the control is as important as the control itself and how you utilize that control. We will be looking at examples at each and every one of those principles in a minute. Adaptive. Adam says it needs to be one word, but really what it is omnichannel, context-aware, and adaptive. And I'm a big fan of movies, as I said. I'm not sure if you follow Oscars, but this year, one motion picture received 7 Academy Awards and was called Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. So you will remember that now. Everything means that we can't just use that credentials or passkeys. We have to look at the context of that person and what they're trying to do. Everywhere means that it needs sometimes to be an omni-channel experience. And a first example of omni-channel experience are passkeys on your iPhone or on your Google, on your Android. So you have to take the picture of your QR code, we're handing off to another channel, you're authenticating, and then you're coming back to the channel that you first started. And all at once means really signifies the adaptive character of the journey. So we cannot be prescriptive. Do you want MFA? Yes. Do you want SMS? Yes. Adaptive character is completely different. Connected. This is the one that I'm very passionate about. Leave no one behind. Hardly anyone in our life goes through the life on their own. Hardly anyone. And only those unlucky and unfortunate do so. So when the chips are down, I can go to my neighbor, I can go to my brother, my sister, my boss, my friends, and ask for help, and they'll go and do the shopping for me. I'll give them cash, they'll do that for me. Somehow we completely forgot about that concept in digital world. And it's completely siloed. So if I can't get in, and I call customer services, only I can do it, right? And when I call the customer services and they authenticate me, It's not okay to authenticate with KBA online. It's not appropriate. But when you call the service center, that's okay. If we went to Rachel Tobac's opening keynote, that's exactly what she said. So I'm being authenticated probably by the worst person in the world to do that. They don't know me, they've never seen me, they don't know how I talk, they don't know how I look, and I can print that passport on a new printer. And everyone knows that my dog's name is Tilda. It's all over Facebook. Last but not least, it's balanced. 50 shades of security. Security, identity is a function of business and security, but really, we sometimes forget it's a function of business, but it really doesn't matter, because security is a function of a business, so it's implied. Isaka says that the primary role of security is to enrich business, period. Security is not there to stop business. Security is there to enhance business. And we cannot take security, we have to balance identity just like we balance every other security controls, and we have to scale them. So let's look at the examples. First one, inclusive by design. A couple of months ago, my mother-in-law needs to make a bank transfer. She normally goes to post office, fills out the form. Yes, there are still people doing that. But now she cannot go. Whether that's permanent or temporary, it doesn't really matter. She tries to log into the bank. She has an iPad. She doesn't see very well, but she's got a magnifying glass. The font is not big enough, but she can get by. And PSD2 tells you that you need to authenticate transactions above £50 in euro, above €50. And the text message being sent from the bank says this: from bank to you, P784, blah, blah, blah. I'm an identity professional, and I would put that code in. And it says access denied. She tries again and again, and her account gets locked out. Because we need to protect the person in the bank, right? And now we are in a whole lot of problem, because she now needs to go to the bank. So a couple of months later, I arrived, and I looked at those text messages, and by accident, I press page down. To my surprise, because she has a feature phone, because she cannot see, she cannot use a smartphone, it turns out that the code is 2 pages down. She has no chance of knowing that. So the control is okay, SMS, but the content is wrong. Adaptive. Like I said earlier, tick, go, no, adaptive. So we're going to check username and password, we're going to check if they logged in, and then we're going to check the context. Is that person vulnerable? And there's many ways, this is just a conceptual, there's many ways that we can figure that out, by implied or discovery or whatever. And we change the journey for that person, and we say, okay, if that's not a vulnerable person, we're going to use push notification, that's fine. If it is a vulnerable person, are we going to use that person to authenticate, and maybe a control from another person to do that? And we'll look into that use case in a minute when we talk about connected identity. And then at the end, maybe this person could do with MFA SMS. Now, I am not saying that we need to downgrade the security standards to authenticate those people, although mathematically speaking, fraud prevention is about balance and reducing, not elimination. But when we look at the security, I'll tell you how we can breathe a new lease of life into weaker controls to make them strong. So sometimes we need to use more controls to protect those people. Adaptive channels. This is a real-life example. It's an airline, which I'm not going to mention. I'm not here to shame anyone, but the person calls, starts a message, and I've booked the flights. I cannot rebook it. There should be, and it tells me to call your service center. I'm deaf. And the person responds, our team, social team, cannot access your booking, so you need to really call the service center. Exactly which part of I'm deaf didn't you understand? You're missing the point, right? So we have now channels, we have chatbots, we have everything now to actually serve that customer and strongly authenticate them using passkeys. We can push notifications, we can use push notifications to the phone to bring up a FIDO2 passkey to authenticate that person. Very simple. Connected. This is the one I was talking about earlier. So I call the service center and I say, I need to reestablish the trust. The principle of identity, the whole identity is based on trust and is built on trust. You can see that it's an OIDC, you can see this in SAML. It's all about trust, right? If I trust the IDP, I'm going to log you in. The IDP will log you in. I'm going to give you access to the resources because I trust the IDP. So we're building that trust based on that dotted line there. Direct, direct relationship between in this case, a son, so a kid and a bank. But we have a working relationship with the kid's dad. And there is a very strong relationship between dad and son. So why can't we build that third line using the principle of a friend of my friend is my friend? We could do that. So when we talk about, for example, account recovery, and David Mahdi in a previous session put account recovery as one of the elements of life cycle. Very cool. So I'm calling the call center, worst person. So I ask my friends, who's the best person to authenticate me? And everyone says, my family, my brother, my sister, my colleague, my neighbor, my boss. Missing is one of the latest movies. A woman goes missing and her child, her daughter, is looking for her. She manages to get into her email, and she manages to reset password for all the services that she's been using just to find her. So all the good reasons. But the point is that once she gets access to the email, she gets access to everything. Because we're not really authenticating that person. So what normally would happen is we call the service desk, but it's exactly the same thing. What about if through either implied or voluntary relationship, that process is triggered by a helper? So I go to Selvin and say, Selvin, I forgot my phone. I need to log into a meeting yesterday. I know my credentials, I know my username and password, but I can't get this push notification. So he can initiate the procedure where by initiating, and it's all accountable, we switch that context to him in my journey. So I put my username and password, and he approves that with push notification, and I'm in. I don't have to reset it. I don't have my phone. If I call the service desk and I change my phone to something else, re-register, I'll have to do that all over again when I get back home and get my phone back. So real-life relationships need to have the sort of equivalent in digital journeys, and we completely forgot about that. Power of attorney is something that's been used for many, many years. And power of attorney has its use in digital journeys and wealth management, but not in many other places. And pretty much any service should be able to utilize this strong relationship. After all, I trust Selvin. I know he's not, and he's accountable. So what's the big problem here? Why cannot he authenticate me? Now, one disclaimer, I'm not getting much success and traction in financial services when I say that, but I do get traction everywhere else. But I think maybe we can mature where this concept could be used everywhere. And my aunt, when the internet wasn't working, turns out that it was a power supply. And the power supply, they sent it to her to a pickup, like this drop boxes, whatever it's called, the post boxes, right? And all she needs to pick it up is launch the app on her smartphone, which she doesn't have, to open it. So what does she do? She has to give her credentials to her neighbor who has a smartphone to go and pick it up for her. Not quite. This is 2023, right? Delegation, we have UMA, we have reach authentication requests, we have all the controls needed, impersonation, may act claims. We can use all that to solve this problem in a proper way. And this peer circles, that can be used positively or negatively. So we can use that to submit an approved transaction or to stop a transaction. So if you think about this, if there's an elderly, vulnerable person that everyone is trying to sell services to them, and we do, absolutely we do. If you look at the email of my mother-in-law, it's shocking. If we detect that something's untoward or not usual, why can't I approve that transaction, be notified? So I can stop that transaction to help that person. Right, balanced, 50 shades of security. I don't like SMS because it's weak. And okay, using SMS as an additional factor reduces the fraud, reduces the credential-based attacks by 99%. But on the spectrum of MFA, yes, it's the weakest method together with voice. So we don't use that. And we're now gonna use push notifications, automatically excluding those who don't have smartphones. In UK, there's a new regulation coming in this year in financial services called customer duty. And it says that you cannot do that. You have to be able to serve everyone and not discriminate them based on possession. Also, if you buy a service, any digital service, it shouldn't be difficult to change or cancel that service. So the example of I need to rebook my flight, I can book anything, but I can't rebook anything online. Why? Why do I need to call you to rebook anything? After all, you're going to do exactly the same through a digital channel. You're not going to rewrite the ticket for me by hand. So the customer duty says we have to look after those vulnerable, and it has a very wide impact, and it comes in this year, and it's the first step towards inclusive identity. And remember when I said earlier, let's use SMS. We have other controls. We have device fingerprinting, right? So why can't we use SMS if we see that the flow is initiated from a known device? And we know where they are, we have the IP address, we have the profile of the browser, and some of the fingerprinting solutions can do that with 90+% certainty. Together, those two controls suddenly become very, very strong. So, my top recommendations is remember that all the architects around there, controls are not everything, is how you deploy that control is equally important. My mother-in-law, the internet, we didn't want a contract. It's a pay-as-you-go thing. So every month I go and top it up. And the internet service provider decided to introduce MFA to log into the account. Fair. They use SMS. Fair. Do you know where they send that SMS? They send that SMS to the SIM card in the router. So all my mother-in-law needs to do is go on the iPad, type in 192.168 / then she has to go to the router and read the long password of the admin account, which I can't read. And then she just needs to click away three steps away to it's not going to work, right? There's nothing wrong with that control. Why can't we send it to a different number? After all, it's her security and her decision that she trusts someone else. Adaptive, not prescriptive, as much as we can. Cradle to grave and beyond. Let's remember those are connected and they exist beyond our lives. Facebook introduced the concept of when you go away, when you pass away, who is the person that you want to hand over the account to? Why not? Identity is connected. Let's remember we need to help each other in digital journeys just like we help each other in a normal life. And this is a FIDO conference. If I can use FIDO and passkey, why can't Selvin approve my transaction with his passkey? And we're going beyond the context of a user. And we have to balance identity like any other security product. Thank you. I'll take any questions if there are any.
Let me have a mic anymore. That's I have to turn it on myself. They don't trust me. All right. Does anyone have any questions? I think we have some questions. Yeah.
It's not a question, it's an observation.
That's good. That's all good. Let's have some conversations.
An observation. I was in a session yesterday with Joyce. I don't know if anyone was there. And Joyce is blind. And she pointed out something that I hadn't realized. And that's with a pass key, is that you have to scan a QR code. And that's actually a really hard thing to do if you're blind. And also if you have any kind of motor condition like Parkinson's or something like that. So we're still not doing a great job with our very latest bit of technology. So one of the takeaways for me from this conference is I'm going to try and go and work out how we can work around that. But it's not easy because it wasn't thought of and sorted out up front.
That is a great point, right? And it has two sides. The one side is that controls are not a panacea. Like passkey doesn't solve the third world hunger problem. It's a great thing, but it's not appropriate to use it everywhere because sometimes you can't use it. Secondly, we can try to make the passkey, the QR code go away. With near field communication, we can actually scan that, and we do that. When I build some journeys, we build journeys to withdraw cash from cash machine without cards. It also is a QR code, and one of the first things that my CTO office said was, I hate QR codes. And they said, why can't you just use an NFC? So we can either change that control, change the passkey, how we do it, or we can use another control, right, to do that and to identify. Because identifying a user is not really a security measure, it's an information thing, right? So I present something to you that will send push notification or SMS to me, right? So that's a very good point, and again, it's the security it's the inclusive by design, So thank you for saying this, because that's exactly my point, right? This is my sentiment. We have to think about those things without focusing on specific types of people. Like, this doesn't have to be a person with Parkinson's. This can be a person who just had an accident, right? And they can't do it. And digital vulnerability doesn't discriminate. It's pervasive, and it affects all of us at some point in life.
So I just wanted to add on to that we're really lucky not only to have the UX working group, but that Joyce Yoshida from VMware is a key contributor to that for reasons like this. So it's really, some folks cannot use a mouse. So even if it's a QR code and there's an option to click out of that to try another way, that's still not okay, right? So they are relying on keyboard a lot of the time, and so building things for like screen reader best practices and optimizing around those scenarios is better. So I think so this is fantastic, and also that's a key thing that needs to be worked on within the FIDO Alliance to ensure that these flows it's not going to be it shouldn't be an automatic QR code. Maybe there's a selection process of a couple different options that you can leverage through the keyboard instead of having to click a mouse. So the relying on a mouse click is not really helpful for inclusivity with authentication.
My job is done here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.